When friendships collide with boundaries, a journey of self-respect and unexpected revelations. In life, we all encounter moments when we're faced with choices between accommodating others and respecting our own boundaries. This story dives into the intricacies of friendship, boundaries, and self-worth. It explores how relationships can sometimes make us question our choices, our patience, and even our sense of self. Yet they provide essential lessons about mutual respect and personal growth. This story unfolds in two parts: the struggle of one woman navigating her friendship with a demanding vegan friend and the unexpected situation of a man caught in a social media saga with a fitness enthusiast. Both stories reveal how respecting our boundaries and setting expectations in relationships are pivotal steps toward personal well-being and healthy friendships. At the heart of the first story is a woman in her 50s who finds herself constantly accommodating a friend named Lauren, who has specific dietary and lifestyle choices. She's vegan and doesn't drink alcohol. On the surface, these choices are commendable, and they reflect Lauren's values and preferences. Yet, problems arise when Lauren begins to expect others to follow suit, subtly pressuring her friend group to always dine at vegan-friendly establishments, despite the limited options in their area. Imagine this woman and her group of friends, eagerly planning a rare night out, only to find their options restricted time and time again. The frustration grows, but she keeps her silence for the sake of maintaining peace. One night, the group decides to meet for dinner. And as always, Lauren immediately voices her preferences. At first, the others agree out of respect. But as the pattern repeats, the strain on their enjoyment becomes evident. Conversations are stifled, as Lauren often steers the group's focus back to her lifestyle choices, occasionally sending them articles or videos on the harmful effects of alcohol. Even when they're only sipping a casual glass of wine, the woman, our storyteller, reaches a tipping point. She decides to finally address the issue and speaks to Lauren directly, suggesting they find a way to balance everyone's choices. This conversation, however, doesn't go as planned. Lauren takes offense, asserting that friendship should be about spending time together regardless of food or drink. While the situation may seem trivial, it resonates deeply with anyone who's ever had to navigate a friendship that felt one-sided. Lauren's expectation that her friends constantly prioritize her choices becomes a burden, overshadowing the joy they once shared. And while Lauren believes that her friends should naturally adapt, the woman realizes that true friendship shouldn't come at the expense of personal happiness. This turning point in their relationship highlights a valuable lesson: friendships, much like any other relationship, require mutual respect and an understanding that both parties' preferences and boundaries matter. In the second part of our story, we meet a man in his 40s who frequents the gym early in the morning. His routine is straightforward and peaceful until he meets a young woman in her 20s, who has recently taken an interest in recording her workouts to build her online presence as a fitness influencer. The two share polite greetings and friendly small talk, and for a while, everything seems normal. But one day, she asks him to spot her during a particularly challenging squat attempt. While she's recording herself, he hesitates, uncomfortable with the idea of being filmed while in close proximity to her, especially as her attire is minimal and he is aware of how the situation could be misinterpreted if seen by his wife or coworkers. After expressing his discomfort, the young woman becomes defensive, accusing him of body shaming and overthinking her intentions. He feels uneasy but decides to stick to his boundary. His intuition proves right as he later learns that the woman has been posting embellished stories on her social media, framing him as her gym crush and creating a fictionalized romantic narrative for her followers. Although her posts blur his face, he finds himself in an awkward and somewhat absurd situation. His wife, amused by the unfolding drama, encourages him to play along, viewing the entire situation as harmless entertainment. Still, he can't shake a sense of discomfort and questions whether he should continue engaging in this bizarre charade. These two seemingly unrelated stories converge in their underlying message. Sometimes, the biggest hurdles in relationships aren't about differences in lifestyle or misunderstandings but about respecting personal boundaries and knowing when to assert them. In the woman's case, standing up for her own needs helps her realize that she doesn't need to compromise her joy to appease someone who isn't willing to meet her halfway. For the man, The experience with the young influencer is a reminder of how important it is to maintain boundaries. Even when social dynamics or modern technology, like social media, try to blur them. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for personal well-being. These stories remind us that friendships and social interactions are best when they are mutual, respectful, and balanced. In both cases, the protagonists learn that saying no doesn't make them difficult or unkind. It simply affirms their right to enjoy experiences on their own terms. When relationships require us to abandon our happiness or peace of mind, they stop serving their purpose. In life, we often feel compelled to keep the peace or go along with others to avoid conflict. Yet, as these stories reveal, the cost of sacrificing our comfort and preferences is often far greater than the temporary discomfort of asserting our boundaries. It's a delicate balance to find, one that requires introspection, courage, and, at times, difficult conversations. And while we can't always expect others to understand, we owe it to ourselves to uphold the standards that make us feel respected, valued, and true to who we are. The ultimate betrayal and redemption, a journey from heartbreak to triumph. There once was a young woman named Claire who believed her life was set on a beautiful path. Raised in a blended family, she grew up with her mother and stepfather after her biological father had left when she was young. Her stepfather, though not bound by blood, had been her pillar of support, encouraging her to pursue her dreams and supporting her through every trial life threw at her. But like every family, theirs wasn't perfect. She had a stepsister named Grace, a strikingly different character who had always been a thorn in Claire's side. Grace was rebellious, a little too self-centered, and harbored a quiet resentment toward Claire for reasons she never fully explained. As Claire grew, she learned to ignore the little slights, choosing to rise above Grace's pettiness. She poured her energy into her education and career. Meeting Alex, the man she believed would be her forever partner, they met during their college years, bonding over shared dreams and aspirations. Claire felt she had finally found her place, a stable career, a supportive family, even with the complicated dynamics, and a fiancé who promised her the world. But everything changed in a single, gut-wrenching moment. Just a week before her wedding, Alex disappeared. Claire panicked, searching for answers, reaching out to his friends, and wondering if he was hurt or lost. Then, she found the letter, cold, impersonal, and devastating. In it, Alex revealed he had eloped with Grace, claiming they were meant to be together. He insisted he had realized his feelings for Grace only after he and Claire had gotten engaged and believed fate had brought him to his true love. For Claire, those words cut deeper than any physical wound. It was betrayal of the highest order, not only from her fiancé but from her own stepsister. The pain was so intense that Claire felt paralyzed. She couldn't even bring herself to cry, she simply lay in bed, numb to the world around her. Her stepfather, ever the loving parent, shouldered the burdens for her. He dealt with canceling the wedding, smoothing over the family's embarrassment, and even covering the expenses. The entire family was shocked, and her father was furious, nearly hiring a private investigator to track the pair down. But Claire stopped him, unwilling to prolong her suffering. She decided to let them go, vowing never to let this betrayal define her life. Despite the trauma, Claire began the arduous journey to rebuild her life. Her father, recognizing her potential and desire for a fresh start, offered her a position in his business. She accepted, diving headfirst into the role, learning the intricacies of the industry and slowly moving up the ranks. Work became her refuge. She spent long days at the office, using her career to distract herself from the heartbreak. Therapy helped her confront the anger, sadness, and deep sense of betrayal that Alex and Grace had left in their wake. But just as she began finding stability, her past came crashing back. Months after the wedding that never was, Claire started receiving postcards. They were from Grace, who was now living in California with Alex. Each card contained a smug note and photos of her and Alex, flaunting their life together, as if mocking Claire's heartbreak. These postcards, laced with a malicious sort of arrogance, left Claire struggling once again. It felt as though Grace was determined to reopen wounds that were just beginning to heal. But Claire held her ground, choosing not to respond, determined to take the high road. In time, Claire's resolve paid off. Grace's attempts at provoking her grew weaker, And eventually, they stopped altogether. With the support of her family and her stepfather's mentorship, Claire rose to a management role within the company. Her career soared, and as the years passed, the betrayal that had once consumed her began to feel like a distant memory. Years later, however, life would throw another curveball. One afternoon, Claire was at home when the doorbell rang. She opened the door to find Grace standing there. But this wasn't the vibrant, haughty Grace from the past. This Grace looked tired, frail, her clothes faded and worn. She hesitated, and then in a voice that was barely a whisper, asked Claire for help. She explained that Alex had lost his job, that they were struggling to make ends meet, and that she desperately needed a job. Claire could hardly believe what she was hearing. The stepsister who had stolen her fiancé, mocked her pain, and then discarded her was now on her doorstep, pleading for mercy. Claire felt an odd sense of pity, but also a sense of satisfaction. This was her chance to take back her power, to assert her self-worth. She told Grace, calmly but firmly, that she didn't hire cheaters and shut the door. Grace's pleas turned to frustrated knocks. But Claire didn't budge. She knew the boundaries she had set, and she wasn't about to compromise them now. She contacted her father afterward, explaining the situation, and was relieved to hear he supported her decision. Their family had long since distanced themselves from Grace after her betrayal, unwilling to accept her back after the pain she had caused Claire. In the days that followed, Grace's desperation only grew. She began showing up at Claire's workplace, trying to catch her attention and causing scenes. Eventually, security had to intervene, and Grace was escorted out multiple times. Claire even had to contact the authorities, filing for a restraining order after Grace tried to confront her outside her office building. It was a situation that left Claire feeling both empowered and saddened. The stepsister who had once been so proud and confident was now reduced to desperation, clinging to any chance she could get. Through it all, Claire found herself reflecting on the twists and turns life had taken. She didn't relish Grace's suffering, but she couldn't ignore the irony either. After years of work and personal growth, she had become the successful, independent woman she had once dreamed of being. Grace, who had tried so hard to hurt her, was now facing the consequences of her own actions. The experience left Claire with a profound sense of closure. She realized that forgiveness didn't mean allowing Grace back into her life. Instead, it was about letting go of the anger and resentment that had once consumed her, embracing her own worth, and refusing to let the past dictate her future. In the end, Claire had achieved the ultimate victory, not by seeking revenge, but by rising above the pain and living her best life. The unexpected journey of love and parenthood after divorce. In an ordinary town lived a woman named Grace, who thought she had everything figured out. She'd married her college sweetheart, Daniel, a kind and stable man who'd shared her dreams of family and the future. Over a decade, they built a life together, welcoming 3 children into their home. They filled their days with school runs, weekend outings, and bedtime stories. Yet, despite the happiness they shared, their marriage began to unravel. It started slowly, with misunderstandings and unresolved conflicts. Grace, deeply invested in motherhood, often felt overwhelmed by her identity's transformation from woman to mother. Daniel, on the other hand, was an incredible father but seemed emotionally distant, almost as if he had his own struggles but never voiced them. They drifted apart without any single incident of betrayal. But over time, their shared life felt empty and forced. The day they decided to divorce was one filled with both relief and sorrow. Grace remembered sitting across from Daniel in their living room, staring at a picture of their children on the mantel. "This is best for both of us," she'd said softly, her voice breaking, and Daniel, always the rock, nodded in agreement, though his eyes betrayed his sadness. For the first time in over a decade, Grace and Daniel went their separate ways, each finding a new normal. They divided their time with the children, committed to co-parenting without animosity. Surprisingly, they got along better after the divorce than they had during the final years of marriage. Grace often mused how strange it was. Removing the label of marriage seemed to free them. And they became friends again. Months passed, and life settled into a rhythm. Daniel started dating someone new. And while Grace felt a pang of jealousy at first, she reminded herself that they were no longer together. She found solace in the time she had to herself when the children were with their father. Yet, the loneliness crept in sometimes. A quiet reminder of the life she'd left behind. Then, one night, everything changed. As Grace navigated life after divorce, she settled into an unexpected calm. Her days were filled with the familiar rhythms of motherhood, preparing school lunches, helping with homework, and managing the chaos of 3 young lives. But on the days her children were with Daniel, Grace felt a loneliness she hadn't anticipated. She would sit in her empty home, surrounded by reminders of the family life she had once dreamed of, and wonder if she had made the right decision. The first few months post-divorce were a rollercoaster of emotions. She missed the steady hum of family life, the routine of dinner as a family, the shared bedtime rituals, even the quiet companionship she had once shared with Daniel. Yet, there was also a sense of freedom in her solitude. She could rediscover herself, re-engage with her passions, and take back control of her life. Friends encouraged her to date again, but Grace wasn't ready. She told herself she needed time, space to heal and redefine what she wanted from her next chapter. As for Daniel, he too was adjusting to his new reality. He had found companionship with a woman he met shortly after the divorce. Someone who seemed supportive and understanding of his responsibilities as a father. Grace had heard about the relationship from mutual friends and tried to be happy for him, though she couldn't deny the sting it brought. Seeing him with someone else made her question if she had made a mistake. But every time they met to exchange the kids, their interactions reaffirmed the decision. They were kind and polite to each other but lacked the spark they'd once shared. Their co-parenting arrangement was working surprisingly well. A structured but flexible plan that allowed each parent ample time with the children. They had agreed to alternate weekends and holidays and even managed to attend events like school functions and family gatherings together without conflict. It was the kind of partnership they'd always hoped for, just not in the way they'd initially imagined. One evening, when Grace had the kids, she got an unexpected call from Daniel. Their youngest child had come down with a high fever while staying at his house, and he wasn't sure what to do. In that moment, Grace felt the old worry bubble up. This was still her child, still their shared responsibility, even if they were no longer together. "Bring him to the hospital," Grace urged. "I'll meet you there." In the hospital waiting room, they sat side by side, bound together by the worry for their child. Hours passed as they waited for test results, and in that time, the barriers they'd built after their divorce slowly came down. They spoke candidly about their fears, their shared love for their children, and the ways they both struggled with the new normal. For the first time in months, Grace felt a sense of warmth and familiarity that had been missing since their marriage ended. The hours turned into days, as their son had to undergo a minor surgery and spend multiple nights in the hospital. Grace and Daniel stayed at the hospital together, trading off who stayed with their son and who went home to get the other kids ready for school. The time spent together, albeit under stressful circumstances, rekindled an intimacy they thought was lost forever. In those quiet moments, when they took turns holding their son's hand, Grace was reminded of the many reasons she had fallen in love with Daniel in the first place. On the night of their son's discharge, they brought him back to Grace's home to settle him in. The other children were thrilled to have their sibling back, and Daniel lingered longer than usual, helping to tuck the kids into bed. Once the children were asleep, Grace and Daniel found themselves alone together. In the familiar comfort of the home they had once shared, they talked late into the night, reflecting on their journey and the twists of fate that had led them to this moment. The tension that had been building between them over the past few days finally gave way, and they ended up sharing a passionate night together. In the days that followed, they both tried to brush it off as a momentary lapse, a product of heightened emotions and shared responsibility. But the consequences of that night would soon make themselves known. Grace discovered she was pregnant. When she found out, Grace was overwhelmed. She hadn't planned on having another child, especially not with Daniel. She wrestled with the implications of this new reality. Their relationship was no longer a romantic one, and she wasn't sure she wanted to rekindle it. Yet, there was something undeniable about the life they had created together, a bond that went beyond the constraints of marriage or divorce. After days of contemplation, she decided to tell Daniel. They met for coffee, and she broke the news gently, watching his face shift from shock to an understanding smile. Daniel, ever the pragmatist, listened as she expressed her concerns, acknowledging that this was far from an ideal situation. They discussed the possibility of co-parenting this new baby, just as they had been doing with their other children, and agreed to take things one step at a time. The months that followed were a whirlwind. Grace and Daniel navigated their new dynamic with care, determined not to confuse their children or disrupt the stability they had managed to create. They continued to live separately, co-parenting their children and preparing for the arrival of their newest family member. Despite their efforts to keep things simple, the love between them slowly resurfaced, complicating an already delicate situation. As Grace's pregnancy progressed, she found herself leaning on Daniel more and more. He attended doctor's appointments, helped set up a nursery in her home, and provided emotional support through the ups and downs of pregnancy. Their interactions were gentle, almost shy, as they rebuilt their trust and intimacy bit by bit. They both knew the risks of diving back into a relationship but couldn't ignore the feelings that had blossomed anew. When their baby girl was born, Grace and Daniel's lives changed in ways they hadn't anticipated. Holding their newborn daughter, they felt a renewed sense of purpose, a shared commitment to their family that transcended their past mistakes. In the hospital room, as Grace watched Daniel cradling their daughter, she felt a deep gratitude for the journey they had taken together, even the difficult parts. Their relationship, however, was still far from conventional. They decided not to move back in together, at least not right away. Instead, they maintained their separate homes, choosing to be present for each other and their children without the pressures that had once strained their marriage. They agreed to keep things simple, allowing their love to grow at its own pace, free from the expectations that had once burdened them. Their family life took on a new shape, one that didn't fit traditional molds but worked for them. Their children adjusted well to the new addition, and their shared time as a family was filled with joy and laughter. Grace and Daniel learned to appreciate the beauty of their unconventional arrangement, realizing that love and family didn't have to follow a predetermined path. Their journey was uniquely theirs, a testament to resilience, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. In the years that followed, Grace and Daniel continued to grow, both as individuals and as co-parents. They found happiness in their own spaces but remained deeply connected, building a partnership based on mutual respect and shared love for their children. Their story, though complicated, became a source of strength and inspiration, a reminder that sometimes, the best relationships are the ones that don't fit neatly into societal expectations. In the end, Grace looked back on her journey with a sense of peace. She had learned that love doesn't always come in a straight line and that family can be redefined in beautiful, unexpected ways. Their journey was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever came next, together, yet apart, in the way that worked best for them.